That is actually talking about the role of technology and how do we have to be agile and innovative and being able to respond very quickly. Gillian, finish your thought, please.
No, my last point was simply that I think the capital will be there. I think the commerce, the activity is going to be stopping and starting. I think confidence, though, is the issue. And I don't think that confidence is going to return quickly. If you look back to earlier episodes of pandemics in history, serious pandemics, what's very stark is that you don't just suddenly switch on a switch and everyone starts back up again, unfortunately. And, you know, if you look back at what's happening in China right now and Asia, which appear to have it quite well under control, again, that's not the case. So being agile, I think, is going to be absolutely crucial. I think it's going to be more like a sort of a W for quite a while, unfortunately.
Yeah, W looking like a heart. And let's actually hear from Cristina and Antelo. Thank you so much, Gillian.
I'm sorry for the Zoom problem.
No, absolutely. Cristina and Antelo, principal of Ferox Strategy, welcome back to this weekly update. Gillian was talking about the response of the government. You're always bringing us updates from policy at the policy level. Give us 3 minutes of what's happening this week, and when do you think there's going to be some changes, probably for lockdown? You know, like elevating or lifting some of the barriers that have been closed.
Sure. Actually, you know, I recognized last week I got into my talking points so quickly I didn't introduce myself. Cristina Antelo at Ferox Strategies, one of, I won't say the only, but at least one of only a few Latina-owned government relation shops here in Washington, D.C. Talking about reopening, we are embarking on a period now where policymakers are starting to think about that and how that's going to come together. We saw a very interesting press conference yesterday with President Trump saying that he has absolute authority to determine this. I think a lot of the governors disagree with him and will not follow his lead if they don't think that it is safe for their specific states. In particular, now what we are seeing is that governors are banding together, recognizing that there is a regional impact and that it makes sense for them to work together and to plan and to coordinate. So on the Northeast corridor, we heard the announcement of New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. They're coming together with their own committee of officials that will include a health official as well as an economic official, as well as the chiefs of staff for their governors. That way they can, again, design their reopening plans in a way that is smart for their region. On the West Coast, you saw California, Washington, and Oregon roll out their formal partnership, and their plan should be announced later today. On the upper Midwest, we're seeing, though not official, the coalescing of a group with Minnesota, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And in the DMV here in Washington, D.C., D.C. along with Maryland and Virginia are also starting to strategize. And so all of that is in kind of direct contradiction to what is happening at the White House as they plan their own committee for reopening. I think the initial press reports of Ivanka and Jared Kushner being on there took away from the seriousness, but now it seems that it's basically the cabinet plus a few, including the White House chief of staff, as well as some economic advisors, Larry Kudlow and Peter Nabarro. So all of that to say that there is a plan that's coming together with the policymakers. It might be coming down to a powerful showdown between governors versus the president, and only the Constitution will be able to decide that. So we'll watch that closely. But I would bet that the governors are going to have a lot of influence here on how their states open back up. To give you also an update on the implementation of the CARES Act, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin has predicted that 80 million Americans will receive their relief payments this week. So that might happen as early as tomorrow, but we should see that and look for press reports to see if that is confirmed or if there are any snags or problems at the Treasury Department in rolling those out. They have also decided or are starting to roll out the early parts of the state and local coronavirus relief fund. That's going to be about $150 billion of direct appropriations from the CARES Act into the state and local governments with more than 500,000 people. Half of that money will be distributed within the next 2 weeks, hopefully, and the other half will then follow. It's important for those that are on the call, if you have any ties to your state and local governments, or if you're members of your state and local government, city council members, things like that, state and local governments have until April 17th to apply. That is Friday. So get to work quickly to get your piece of that first half of the money of the tranche that is going out this week.
And Cristina, if that is possible, what we will do is you will send us a link on that. We will put it on the HispanicStar.org as a, like as a banner for people to know that there's a deadline. Cristina, I want to thank you so very much for being with us again. Looking forward to seeing you next week with more news and the updates on policy and what we need to do. In the last 4 minutes of the call, I want to welcome again Jesus Mantas, partner of IBM. Please tell us, Jesus, Managing Director, please tell us, Jesus, what are business practices? What are things that you've seen, particularly talking about what Gillian was mentioning about how technology is becoming, like a friend? And what are the best practices that you laid out last week or last time? Seven best practices that you've seen being more useful and incorporated so that our Hispanic leaders can take that and share that with their communities.
Yeah, I think Gillian, I was nodding on your point because one is I actually share your point of view, but two, I really appreciated that you brought this, element of hope. Is not everything is bad. And there's going to be, I think the 2 points that you made. One is the post-COVID-19 world is not going to be like pre-COVID-19 world. That world is going to be different. And as the saying goes, never waste a good crisis. And I think society has the opportunity to not let this human crisis and economic crisis go to waste, to actually create some lasting adaptation that will be good for the environment. It will be good for many aspects of society. I think there is one point that I wanted to follow on your point, Gillian, which is think about education. Education is a critical element of our Hispanic community, for example, in the United States. When you look at the education system of 100 people going into the school system, on average, 53 will actually finish a high school diploma and 23 will have an associate degree. If you're Hispanic, that 23 drops to 13. So of 100 people, only 13 come out with an associate degree. And that associate degree makes a dramatic difference in the ability of those people to provide for their families, to have the level of income that will create, the society that we want to live in. Education is one of the main keys. And what this crisis has actually taught everybody is that technology is an element of that education. So one of the side effects that we're actually seeing working with our PTech school, our Pathway to Technology schools, is that many teachers did not know what Zoom is, as Gillian said. But after COVID-19, every teacher is going to be equipped to reach to any student, whether they can actually come to the class or not. So everybody is going to figure out that they can actually learn. Curriculums are being made available, freely for students to really get on that. In our case, we created the Pathway to Technology schools, very prominent on New York State, for example, but 67% of our students in Pathway to Technology are Hispanics. And those people basically finish with an associate degree just by adding 2 years to every high school at no cost. And that basically gives them the technology skills that are gonna enable them to actually lead in the post-COVID-19 world. So I was nodding not only on the role of technology coming out of this, but the actual, lift that we can do for the fairness around education. Yeah. I don't think we talk enough about the impact on carbon. I mean, we have been debating for, I think, Claudia, you personally have been in this topic for decades, trying to convince countries to reduce carbon footprint. Well, it took a pandemic to actually reduce 23% globally, the carbon footprint in 4 weeks. A lot of those elements will not come back, as Gillian said. Some of the practices of telecommute, some of the practices of being able to produce output at a significant lower cost, significant lower carbon emission will actually be systemic. So too early to tell, but I think there is a role in taking this crisis and making sure that we adapt for a number of positive impacts that can help us in post-COVID-19.
And I think that the points well taken. Everybody, thank you so much for Gillian, Tett, for Cristina, Antelo, Jesus Mantas, David Nabarro, Ramiro, Cavazos. Jesus, the only thing to be said is that this pandemic is humanizing us, equalizing us, but only 16% of Hispanics have access to internet and are adequate to be working from home. So we have to make sure that we take this opportunity to make sure that we raise and elevate the problem so that we can get to a solution. And when it's time to reinvent the rules, we reinvent the rules in a way that are, convenient for us as a community, for us as a country, as a society, and for the planet. I want to thank you all for being here today. I look forward to seeing you all next Tuesday. And if you want to join us, we're going to go straight into a watch party to celebrate the premiere of the national anthem in Spanish as commissioned by President Roosevelt in 1945. Thank you all, and see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.